So time to talk the election. So we had the election, which ended on October 17th. And looking at some of the numbers, so we had 191,000 people voted out of around 350,000 eligible people. So that's actually a lot. 55% of people actually voted in the election. We had 88,000 of those be electronic versus paper. So I think that's actually a record for electronic voting percentages. And as we kind of discussed in the last podcast, Tõnis, the the Centre Party lost the majority in this election, so which was kind of expected and what we talked about previously. So maybe let's start there and get your thoughts on the result and where we're going from here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, first regarding the electoral turnout, actually it was decently high.
Okay.
Because usually in local elections, people are not so active in turning out as for parliamentary elections, because voters usually tend to consider local elections as the second or the third rank elections. Mm-hmm. And this is the major reason why electoral turnout is not so high. But actually, it was quite high considering the COVID situation and that the campaign itself wasn't very, let's say, conflictual and exciting and so on. So it was a quite good result concerning electoral turnout. What about Centre Party? Maybe the biggest surprise was that they were able to obtain even more votes in the last elections, I mean in the current elections actually, than 4 years ago in 2017. So actually they were even more successful.
Oh, okay.
But we have to take into account that if you're looking at the results of the elections, then now we have something like 5 or 6 different parties in the city council. Mm-hmm. And in the last elections in 2017, many votes got wasted, because the people were voting for the small electoral unions, which were not able to surpass the electoral threshold.
Which is
5%.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Actually, just touching on the voting numbers there as a first point. Why do you think there were more voters? I mean, we may just be speculating at this point, but do you think it was, and Silver, feel free to give your opinion and thoughts too, but do you think it was because people felt more passionately about this one? Is it with COVID and being more kind of centrally at home and in Tallinn, people were able to focus more on local issues because there weren't, your kind of day-to-day distractions, and so they cared more? Why do you guys think we saw a bigger turnout this time?
Perhaps there were more people passionate about achieving a change in the city government, because obviously a lot of people were expecting for the Centre Party to lose its absolute majority, and perhaps it kind of motivated, and perhaps some of the new parties that entered into the game, like Estonia 200, sort of also mobilized more people. But this is my wild guess. Tõnis might have a more acute answer here.
I think that the organization of the elections did also matter.
Okay.
I mean, there was electronic voting, all the polling stations were opened for the whole week, so pre-elections, so there were a lot of opportunities to cast your vote. So it was actually very well organized, it was very flexible and so on. Great. So I guess the organization also did matter.
And perhaps more expats or foreigners also participated. I don't have exact numbers, but it's my wild guess again, sure. Because we have more people from the European Union as well compared, with 2017. Actually, on paper, we should have over 20,000 of them, according to Statistics Estonia. How many of them voted, we don't know yet. But
sure. And actually, Estonians abroad, do they tend to vote in Tallinn elections, or it's kind of too disconnected?
It seems they are more active during the general election,
Gotcha,
parliament
I
election.
guess.
But in the local
Sense.
elections, I remember even myself when I lived abroad, I don't remember actually then voting. Obviously, general election is more important for, because also there's another thing, because, in order to vote, obviously you have to, in the local election, you have to be registered in that local government, if you're from Tallinn, you have to be registered there. But if you're already living abroad, you might not be even registered here anymore, so.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so coming back to the results. So the Centre Party lost the absolute majority for the first time in 15 years. But actually, there were some other kind of losers as well. So the Reform Party went down. The Social Democrats, I think, considerably lost some of the votes that they'd had previously. And then obviously, I think we saw Eker go up a little bit. Estonia 200 actually get 6% of the votes, I think, as well. So the first time they've been on, and they actually weren't present in the last election, correct? So because they didn't have the seats. But so Centre, Reform Social Democrats have gone down as well. What do you think about them actually losing places as well?
Concerning the Social Democrats, even if you're looking at the general results of the elections in Estonia, then actually they did lose the votes. In the last elections, they got something like 10% all over Estonia. And now they got something like 5%.
Okay.
So it's quite a remarkable downturn. Why? Because even according to the opinion polls, they are not very popular. Something like 7 to 8% of people would vote for them for the parliamentary elections, at least according to the polls.
I think it's been a problem here for a while for them, for the Social Democrats, and I think why the message is not clear. People don't know what the local Social Democrats stand for anymore. I mean, the Social Democrats started in Europe 100 years ago or so in Britain, and originally we know what they stood for. For working classes. Yeah. I mean, I lived in England for a long time. I know how popular it used to be, and even in the UK now there are issues about where where Labour Party stands for. I think the same problem here. A lot of people just don't see them as standing for them. And even if you look at the south of Estonia, where Social Democrats used to be quite popular, Eker has actually taken the votes.
Yeah, which, we'll come back to that.
Yeah, so there you go.
Actually, I wanted to add that if you're looking at the electoral history here in Estonia, and if you're looking at the local elections, then it seems to be that some parties take those elections quite seriously, especially Centre Party has always taken those elections very seriously. Not only in Tallinn, but in general terms as well. And also Eker was taking those elections very seriously, and Estonia 200. But traditionally, for example, Social Democrats, for them local elections they usually don't care much. They don't put such an emphasis on that those elections, or don't think that they really matter. For them, parliamentary elections are much more important.
But it seems this time they actually did try. I mean, they even I saw them on a street quite a few, and they even managed to attract new candidates. Natalie Metz, for example, well known in a sort of Telliskivi creative city circle, and etc. But it still didn't. It didn't result. Didn't achieve a good result. So I guess you mentioned as well. Estonia 200 probably ate away some of the Social Democrat supporters as well. Especially some of the liberal ones.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where do we think the vote went? So if let's start with Centre Party. Centre Party, I guess. Overall lost votes or increased? No. They lost a majority, but yes.
They were gaining the votes.
Okay. Okay. So the other kind of, I guess, movements of people, where do we think votes kind of shifted to move away? or move to and from different parties?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I mean, Estonia 200 probably took some from the Reform Party and some from the Social Democrats, and even maybe some from Isamaa, but that might be a bit of a stretch. But they might have done, because if you consider the history of the Estonia 200, I mean, a short history, but some of the people, some of the candidates even, used to be members of Isamaa Party. So, they sort of, they might even attract some of the center-right vote. I mean, with the Estonia 200, it seems is still not 100% clear where they stand. Are they liberal? Are they center sort of right, or are they in the center? They say now they're liberal, but not 100% clear, I think.
Okay.
Yes, the same, because the Centre Party was actually astonishingly successful in keeping their voters. I was quite surprised. The Reform Party did lose some votes, mostly due to Estonia 200, I guess, and Social Democrats as well. EKRE did not gain so many votes, but I don't know whether they were able to get some votes from Isamaa or from Social Democrats or from the Reform Party. I don't have any idea about that.
Yeah. Let's talk about EKRE actually for a moment. We touched on them quite a lot in the last podcast. So they didn't gain considerably in Tallinn, but I think did, for example, outside. So for example, in Pärnu. Why do you think that was? I know we're focusing on Tallinn here today, but I think it's interesting that different parts of the country did make a considerably different kind of shift towards them.
I think EKRE has been very consistent, and a lot of things other parties probably need to learn now. It may sound ironic, but EKRE has been probably the most consistent political party for the past 6-7 years, even probably longer. And Pärnu, where actually this is my hometown, where I originally come from. I live now in Tallinn, but so I do look at what's happening in Pärnu with a concern sometimes, but yeah, EKRE in Pärnu actually, that's more or less where they started, roughly about 10 years ago. I mean, one of the places where they started building up their base. Mart Helme, the former leader of the party, is from Pärnu. He was born there. Gotcha. They've held many events there. They've really actively campaigned, and 6 years ago, when we had the refugee crisis in Europe, sorry, not in Estonia, but across Europe, then EKRE, obviously, that was one of the first times when EKRE really, used it for their own advantage. And I don't remember this happening in Tallinn, but in Pärnu, they even sent some sort of leaflets with a sort of printed kind of Photoshop picture of sort of millions of immigrants from Africa arriving. The clear example of fake news, obviously. But I remember in Pärnu, everyone kind of received it, So, it was the sort of one of the first playgrounds for EKRE.
I think actually that's a really good point about the consistency, because I've been in Estonia now for around nearly 3 years. And probably before, we really dove into the election pieces and the parties, if you'd had asked me six months ago, name political parties in Estonia, the first one I would have said, well, there's those EKRE people. And if you said, what do the political parties in Estonia stand for? I would have said, I don't know about the others, but EKRE is the one that says blah, 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 blah. And actually the message, the kind of voice, the name, and obviously it's a lot of headline news and has been over the last couple of years, so you see more about it. But the actual message, the what do we stand for, what do we pitch, you're right, has been consistent. You can almost predict what they're going to say about a particular topic, and it's out there in the news and very visible.
Yeah, and also they've been quite active of actually meeting people, which I think a lot of other parties don't do. They do it before the election, during the campaign perhaps. EKRE is doing it all the time, especially in the south of Estonia, where they are now popular. They actually meet people, they organize events. They have their own radio broadcast. They have they fake news. Well, I call it fake news. Outlet, etc. And I think there are a lot of disillusionist people, what we call the second Estonia. People who feel like they've been left behind. Obviously we're talking about the successful Estonia, and in many regards Estonia has been very successful. But you can't deny that, especially outside Tallinn, there are so many people who feel left behind. And I guess you have in every country that sort of. Anti-establishment protest vote, and EKRE has been very successful of addressing those people.
And they were putting, or they were working on their party organization. So they were putting quite a lot of emphasis on streamlining their organization, establishing new party branches, and so on. So there was quite a big emphasis on organization.
Okay. One thing I find interesting, actually, and I suppose I shouldn't be surprised from it, I just thought it was interesting, was the way that paper versus electronic voting went. So when we look at the numbers of, or the kind of statistics, percentages between the paper votes and the e-votes, for the e-votes, Reform were actually on top. And for example, if we look at ECRA, the majority of ECRA's votes were paper votes. Centre Party, around 75% of them were all paper votes. What correlation do you think there is between kind of the voter profile almost of someone that jumps on their phone and votes versus goes into a polling booth and votes, and that actually that really kind of coincides as well with how they vote?
I guess it's a correlation between the party preferences and the socioeconomic status of the voters.
Okay.
So
And
if you
age, maybe?
Age matters, also education, also actually trust in political institutions.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
I think so as well. Yeah, trust is very important, and obviously, don't forget that ECRA has been very vocal against electronic vote or online voting. Yeah. So, but I mean, the Centre Party used to be under the previous leader, Edgar Savisaar. So, but I don't know if that has changed now.
No, it has. Okay. Nowadays, they are not so much against electronic voting.
And probably unsurprisingly, most of the Estonia 200 votes were electronic as well.
No surprise.
Which kind of ties in with their general kind of...
They did say at some point in one of the interviews, I think the leader said that we are sort of people for urban city people. And I think she later regretted that, because that automatically you kind of exclude, exactly, you almost saying, are you part of the elite,
So basically, it was correct.
Yeah, looking at the vote, it seems to be,
But I think that actually ties really into what you were saying previously about this being left behind feeling, because I think a lot of that is, and I've come into Estonia as almost part of that world. I work in tech. I came over to work in the startup scene. I'm building that here. And so I can kind of, when I look at Estonia 200, I'm like, yeah, okay, they're like for tech and the advancement of the industry and da-da-da. But to your point, like if you're trying to promote this kind of left behind feeling, etc., this whole you've been left behind because all these foreign people are coming into this tech industry that you don't understand, and then you're excluded from, etc. Then it kind of goes hand in hand with that.
It seems they're in a way competing with the Reform Party. They're competing with the votes from the Reform Party. And I'm not sure in the long term is that the right decision, because Reform Party will still have more people, more money during the campaign. So we shall see. I mean, if you look at the Estonia 200 across Estonia, I think they got about 6% or something. So they were successful in Tallinn and Tartu, which obviously are important because you will, it's our two most important cities here. But they didn't get more than 6% across the country. So
but they were quite successful even in some smaller municipalities.
In some, but in Pärnu they didn't even get across the threshold. I think they got like.
One thing we have to take into account if we are talking about the results of the local elections is that what really matters is the organizational capacity of the parties. If you have a party organization, if you have your candidates in different municipalities, then you would be also successful in local elections. If you don't have this organization, if it's understaffed, there are no people, no well-known candidates, then usually you would fail.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at the Isamaa Party, how many times over the last couple of years we've heard, especially in the media, that Isamaa Party is finished, and obviously sometimes really, they if you look at the polls, indeed they have maybe 4% or so. But come the election, and they still achieve a decent result. I think it was 8% across Estonia. So, because one of the reasons is they have a strong organization still. They so one of the oldest parties here. They still have people everywhere. They also have money still. So yeah, there you go.
Okay. And one thing actually, I'm used to seeing in other countries that I've lived and voted in, whatever, the Green Party making increases normally in places, because the more we can talk about climate change and the importance of that, and the more that their agenda becomes more important, the Greens typically make some gains. That was not the case here. So I think in Tallinn, it was 2.2%. They only got 4,000 votes in the city. Why do you think that is? Is it because Estonia is typically a relatively good country and city from a green perspective, and therefore these agendas aren't front and center of people's minds to promote them and do it? Do you think it's just they haven't had such a big platform here?
I think there's a long history. One of the reasons I think they were in the parliament in 2006 or 7, I think was it, and they had a lot of infighting. So eventually, the sort of the party just kind of disintegrated, and people and I think from that era, people still have sort of a bit of a distrust, because they saw that party is not reliable enough. That's one of the reasons if you look at the history. But of course, the other thing is, they lack people. They just don't convince people. They lack organization. Program is sort of wishy-washy a bit. There are some good ideas, but some ideas are just a bit of a sort of out there, kind of not realistically. It's not possible to implement then. And there was a leadership problem as well. I mean, it has become in the last couple of years a bit of a one-person party. So Züleyxa Izmailova, who was the leader. I mean, she was, when she first was elected the leader of the party, I think it was 4 years ago, of the Green Party. A lot of people expected a lot, because it's just young, energetic woman. But it just in order to build up, you need more than one person up there. And so I think it's again, they haven't been successful also to communicate the message properly as well, and what they stand for. You cannot go to the political debate and say vote for Green because we are green. You need to. If you look at what's happening in Germany, I also good point. In Germany, Greens were very popular. But how did they achieve it? It was obviously a very comprehensive program, a lot of experts, so that they convince voters that they're not just a Green Party, but they also have strong opinion on economy and foreign policy, etc. So,
this is a very important point, because nowadays in Europe, the Green parties are able to talk about social policy, about foreign policy, about very different subjects. But the Greens in Estonia, yes, they are only focused on the environmental issues, and that's it.
Sure.
And the lack of party organization or organizational capacities, and there are no convincing spokespersons as well. So those are also lacking.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
But I hope it will change in future, because looking at what's happening in Europe, indeed, I think they have a potential, but they really need to pick up their business, within, and really, as you said, lacking organization as well. Every party needs a good organization. So
and going back to the Centre Party, so obviously they did well, but Mihail Kõlvart did very well as well. He actually increased his voting, his voters. Why do we think that is?
Because most of the Russian speakers, not
him.
all of them, but a vast majority of the Russian speakers were voting for Kõlvart.
Got it.
So
But I think he's also, if you look at the pre-election popularity polls, and when people were asked who would you rather like to see as mayor of Tallinn, he had a very widespread support. I think even among some
Even among the
Estonians. And I as an Estonian myself, I mean, I can say that I think he's a decent guy. You know? And no offense, I'm not a voter of Centre Party. Maybe I'm telling too much, but I mean, really, I think Kõlvart is actually a decent guy. You know, he's got this aura of actually being a mayor, you know, which some people don't have. You know, if you look at the other candidates there. So I think it's very important that people actually, you know, see, oh, he's actually all right as a mayor. You know.
No, he does. I mean, obviously, I don't get to see a lot of news or interviews with him because they're typically in Estonian or Russian. But he does come across, even in the news that I do see, as very charismatic, very, you know, a lot of presence, a lot of, someone that you would love to go and talk to and find out what he thinks about things.
Yeah, and I think there's increasingly a lot of like younger Estonians and maybe older as well. Again, it's a bit my wild guess, but who actually think it's a good thing that we have a Tallinn mayor is from, you know, different community, Estonian Russian community. Again, you know, it actually shows that we are, you know, we are open place, you know.
I actually love the other part, which is that he has, and I'm going to botch the country, but he also has a non-Estonian, non-Russian kind of background as well. Korean.
Yes.
But yeah, I actually love that there's also this international aspect of him. So it's almost like you're appealing to all three kind of triangular parts.
And by the way, I think Estonians think that Koreans are very smart. So I think it's they probably think it's a good thing.
And he's speaking very good Estonian as well.
Yeah.
And it also matters, especially for the Estonian voters.
Totally.
Yeah. True.
Great. Okay, so now there's not an absolute majority. What happens? So the Centre Party are in talks with the Social Democrats around forming a coalition. Let's talk about that and why the choice was made to go with the Social Democrats versus, you know, pairing up like we have at the national level with the Reform Party or another party.
Actually, pro-party, I mean Isamaa, was almost automatically excluded because they were not interested in cooperating with the Central Party.
Okay.
EKRE as well. And it would be very difficult to imagine that Mihhail Kõlvart is going to form a coalition with the Helmes.
Right.
And the Reform Party. The major issue was that the Reform Party is a quite big party. They got quite a lot of votes, since it would be a quite hard nut to crack for the Centre Party, at least to some extent. And Estonia 200 wasn't very interested in.
Okay.
And so only Social Democrats were ready to form that coalition.
Probably the Social Democrats were the most desperate as well.
Right, because they've lost the pieces.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And just so for my own knowledge, I came here after the last kind of national election, so when a lot of that had already, and I was trying to pick up the knowledge of what had happened and how it had influenced things and whatever. My understanding of that was that originally the Centre and Reform Party didn't form a coalition at that point because basically both of them had such a big chunk that effectively you're each diluting each other's part of the chunk because you're almost kind of 50-50 in a coalition versus, you know, 95-5 or whatever it ended up being. Do you think there's an element of that here where if Centre and Reform had come together, it's another one of like, okay, well, we're almost sharing power at this point, where taking Centre plus 6% of 6% votes that Social Democrats have, they basically retain power at that point?
What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the Reform Party is it's an old experienced party. So yes, for the Centre Party, it would be quite difficult to form a coalition with a party like that. And actually, I guess that the Centre Party wasn't ready to form a coalition based on equal terms. I mean, that we divide all the offices almost equally and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got much to add. I mean, I just think it's a good thing that, you know, there are different parties in power in different places. I don't think it's a good thing that the same party is in power all the time, everywhere. So I think it's a good thing in Tallinn, Centre Party and the Social Democrats are forming the coalition. So, yeah. I mean, I generally think that, we need more different parties. Perhaps the other parties, I hope that they will be sort of, become a bit stronger and bigger. I'm a big fan of coalitions, and I don't think two-party system is good. I mean, we don't have it, but I mean, it's just over the years it has happened. The Centre Party and the Reform Party have become much bigger than the rest. So, and again, I've lived in the UK. I don't think it's sort of two large parties all the time competing with each other that it's necessarily good. I mean,
Absolutely. Coalition governments in general are more accountable or more responsive.
Yeah.
This is the role.
Okay. And I mean, we talked a lot about the actual election, who got in or whatever, but what does it actually mean? So the last time we spoke, Tõnis, the parties had not yet published their manifestos. So we didn't yet know the platforms that they were promoting. But now we do. And now people actually need to obviously deliver on either promises or what they actually put forward. So what does this actually mean? What are we likely to see around the city, both as a whole and also from the international community standpoint?
Actually, it's difficult to tell it right now because, yes, there are coalition talks and so on. Many of those promises were very technical in their nature. They promised to build a new hospital. I don't remember this huge hospital, what was the name of that, but this will be the major investment.
Okay.
Maybe they would do something with the Linnahall as well.
I would love that.
Transform it to a conference center or something like that. I hope so. I don't know.
I mean, if I speak to there's a good saying, a good city is like a good party. People stay longer than really necessary because they are enjoying themselves. I'm quoting, it's a Danish architect called Jan Kehl who said that. But I mean, in a way, it's true. If you're talking about the international community, a lot of the people like yourself, people have come here, a lot of them working for startups, but there is no guarantee that they will stay, and I know many people who have come here, stayed 2-3 years. So we should ensure that, people stay longer. And if I talk to the international community, a lot of the things obviously are same as for local residents that are important. But really what I hear, I mean, the general sort of environment in the city, like, indeed more pedestrian friendly. People do care about bicycle lines, etc. And a lot of people already like Tallinn for open spaces. I mean, again, some Estonians think we are not green.
Yeah.
They will laugh when Tallinn was proclaimed as the green capital of Europe, I think in 2024 or whenever. But actually, if you compare to some other places in Europe, it's actually a reasonably green place, But still, people would like to have more public transport. Again, especially if you come from a different country and you don't have yet car, etc. You do care about efficient public transport, for example. Even night buses. Very practical things, really. That people care about, that they would like to expect more, and probably also more information in different languages, which again I know Tallinn city government has done it quite well, but again still perhaps in some places, if you're going to see a doctor or whatever, on a practical level, still the language is also
I think that's actually probably just to close off, because I know we've kept you guys a long time talking to us, which I'm very, very appreciative of. I think that's an important point, actually, which is context of the international kind of community, in that when I will speak to Tallinn residents, they say, the traffic's gotten so bad. And I look around and I'm like, this is the best traffic I've ever. I've lived in London, I've lived in San Francisco, I've lived, different places. Traffic's amazing here. You can get anywhere in 15 minutes. Oh, the public transportation system is really bad. Like, it's free. There's cars, there's scooters. This is great. I love this. It's so much better than the tube. And so I think you're right that the green piece as well. The context of the international community versus the Estonian community is very different, because for a lot of things we find Tallinn to be amazing and a hugely safe, very easy place to live in. So it's almost like two different agendas. You have agendas to kind of listen to and fix the complaints or queries of the Estonia, of the Tallinn kind of population, and then also the international population and what's going to make this a great city, to your point, for them to stay in and live in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much. Tõnis, again, thanks for giving us more of your time. I really appreciate your expertise.
Thank
Silver,
you.
always great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.